China has reservations about it too, because she came out and said, "What, you shouldn't be expanding the Ukrainian situation with North Koreans." Didn't specifically say that, but they're very upset.
You put forward the idea that North Korean troops may be used to replace Russian troops along Russia's lengthy border with China and Mongolia so they can go to Ukraine. You have often said that China wants to take back Manchuria. What would the effect be of having North Korean troops there?
Well, if he wants to bolster the Russian uh, border, Russian Chinese border, and so on with North Korean troops, that could be very upsetting to China. Not only is it sort of aggressive, but I really maintain that if Russia weakens, and it is weakening. I mean, it's no longer an important economic power. As it continues these behaviors and gets weaker, China will pounce on getting back Manchuria, which was taken from it by a czar 200 years ago. And that would give it also Vladivostok and the Sakhalin Islands, which are resource rich. They don't openly state that this is what they want, but Manchuria is part of Russia only by conquest. It is a Chinese place full of Chinese people.
What do you think he wants to get out of this, and how successful is he proving in this?
Well, I think Russia has gotten everybody all upset and agitated in Asia again. It is maybe not going to backfire on him, but Xi came out, President Xi of China came out at the recent BRICS summit saying uncategorically, this shouldn't be happening. This shouldn't expand. You shouldn't, create problems elsewhere. And he's very upset that North Korea has sent ground troops.
South Korea also reacted very strongly to this, strengthening its support in terms of weapons it would be prepared to supply Ukraine. The security implications, I mean, they're laid out bare here, aren't they, in the way that Ukraine affects countries way beyond its borders?
Well, that's right. This is Putin's world war scheme. He lights fires in every region he possibly can, from Venezuela to Cuba to, of course, Ukraine and Israel. In the Gaza situation, and now this. And I think that it serves him well just to create destabilization, to distract away from what he's trying to do in all of these places. He's a very dangerous leader, and he has instability on his mind. He wants to be world dominant.
And in terms of the closening relationship between North Korea and Russia, one of the great concerns, of course, is what Russia will need to provide or be asked to provide North Korea in return in terms of nuclear or ballistic missile technology. How great a concern, how likely is that?
Well, that's the big worry about their mutual defense pact, which you talked about. I think it was signed just in June, North Korea and Russia's promising them even more technically advantageous nuclear weapons and more nuclear information. And this, of course, is very frightening to all the people all of its surrounding neighbors, you know, from Mongolia to the Koreas to Japan and so on. I think what is going to happen, the knock-on effect, is going to be that South Korea, which has already been a very good ally in terms of providing weaponry and ammunition to Ukraine, is now going to become more militarized, as is Japan, because of concerns. And I think we're going to end up seeing a nuclearized South Korea and a nuclearized Japan. And that makes that region much more dangerous.
Yes, brings me on to my next question was what effect you think the actual war in Ukraine is having, not just on North Korea's nuclear ambitions, and you talk about the Japan and South Korea as well, but the other countries who might not previously have considered having nuclear weapons, perhaps wanting them as the ultimate deterrence.
Well, that's the problem. And, North Korea already has it. I don't know how that happened. It was allowed to happen. You also got an enormous contingent of American military hardware, Navy, and you've got 28,000 American troops in South Korea. What people don't realize is that the Korean War was never settled, it was just stopped. It was an armistice, and they have this DMZ between the two countries. And it's an unsteady, it's not even peace, it's an armistice. And so there are also American troops in Japan, and Japan is very concerned. So it's interesting because they're more concerned about Russia's backing of this crazy rogue regime in North Korea than they are about China. And I think China has reservations about it too, because she came out and said, "What, you shouldn't be expanding the Ukrainian situation with North Koreans." Didn't specifically say that, but they're very upset.
Why do you think President Putin's throwing his lot in with Kim Jong Un?
I think he's very effective. He's got people worried. He's got distraction. He's got another ally that would be willing to do things for him. He agitates the Americans, which is the big demon. He gets NATO all riled up. And headlines are taken away from Ukraine, just as happened over Gaza and Israel when he or helped organize the Hamas attack with Iran against Gaza and embedded in Lebanon. So he's got two hot wars going on and a potential third hot war. This is just mischief, but also strategy.
If we could just focus in a little bit now on the situation in Russia at the moment. An article in the Times reports a huge rise in organised crime and lawlessness in Russia, not unlike the 1990s under Boris Yeltsin. What is the situation and what is fueling it?
I thought it was an excellent article. And I was in Russia. The first time I went to Russia was in February 1991 when it was chaos. It was absolute anarchy and chaos. It was a nightmare. The stores were empty. People were on the streets bartering for jam and puppies, and it was a nightmare. And so Putin came along and restored order. This is very frightening to Russians because many of the Russians are still alive who went through that horrific situation. And what the Times article points out is that his ridiculous war against Ukraine has been killing so many Russian men militarily. We don't know the numbers, but it's over possibly 500,000 wounded and killed. That he has essentially allowed anybody facing charges or in prison to get out if they agree to join the army. And so you're opening the prisons, you're letting out people that have been convicted or people awaiting conviction. And who knows whether they're in the army. And I also got to believe, because the casualties are so high, that perhaps police have been recruited off the streets to help keep the peace at home into the army, National Guardsmen, and so on. So they're creating a potential crisis. And this may lead to some kind of not revolution, but implosion here and there. And then you've got the Chechen leader going off half cocked again, fighting other people in the Caucasus. So things are starting to kind of not fall apart, but get very, very insecure in that country, and that's got to be a worry for Putin.
Yeah, this article also it says that the criminal justice system effectively is collapsing in Russia because not only can people get out of prison if they agree to go and fight in Ukraine, they can also avoid going on trial in the first place if they sign up to the army. It cites a case of a murderer who went to Ukraine with Wagner, came back. He was exonerated from his crime. Then he gets out. He goes and takes a woman at knife point, seriously injures her. Is facing trial, but actually it's all dropped because he signs up with the army. It's an incredible situation. Which if that's happening. I don't know how many people this we're talking about, but it must have an impact on society if these people come back alive.
Well, that's right. I mean, these are terrible, sociopathic players. They may make good soldiers, but will they actually stay or will they desert and go back and do burglaries and murders and robberies and, extortion rackets and so on? I've also got to believe that, they have been training a lot of people to be in the military. They've increased the size of the ground troops. There's a lot of people that know how to use guns, that have guns in that country. So you could get a lot of, and that's what the Times article alluded to, two gangs or people fighting again, gunfights in the streets. And and if they're recruiting police and security guards to go in and feed the meat grinder in Ukraine, maybe this is one of the reasons why that terrible shopping mall terrorist attack happened, the insecure fortifications around the society. I've got to believe that Russians are very nervous and that the place is armed to the teeth.
And Diane, you said earlier, it's a bit like when you were in Russia, when you were there in the 1990s, and then Putin came along and restored order and confidence at the beginning, at least. I mean, what do you see? Can he keep a grip now? Because obviously he's presiding over the situation repeating itself, albeit slightly different.
Well, that's right. I mean, that would, if this gets worse, there's no reason why it wouldn't, it will absolutely remove his reputation as the guy who brings us peace, good government, law and order. In other words, he's part of the problem again. He's just as bad as Gorbachev. He's losing control of the situation, and these are desperate people, and so anything can happen when you've got a situation like that. And we'll see. I think he's created a social problem again. This is not something he can stop with disinformation either. This is word of mouth. If you have a shooting on the streets of your neighborhood, everybody's going to know about it. They'll pick up the phone or they'll move. And so, the word is spreading through Russia among Russians that this guy isn't doing a very good job. He's not winning the war, and he's creating trouble at home.
You've been watching Frontline for Times Radio. My thanks to Louis Sykes, our producer. To support the work of Frontline, hit the subscribe button. You can also listen to Times Radio throughout the day or read it at times.co.uk. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.